Hey guys, Chris here with the Good Old Gamer. So today I'm going to tackle a pretty hot topic. This comes up a lot in our comment section because I've been trying to warn people for a while now. Pairing these high-end GPUs like the GTX 1070, 1080, and the future Titan class graphics cards, and of course their AMD variants with weaker CPUs is just a complete waste of money. Now, a lot of you guys have been resistant to this, and I can understand why. The Core i5 has been the staple. It's been the mainstream processor everybody's gone to for 6 or 7 years now. Unfortunately, I haven't seen anybody else talking about this anywhere, and I happen to be the bearer of bad news. The Core i5 can no longer utilize these newer GPUs, the GTX 1070 or 1080 or faster. Just to go ahead and come up with this PSA announcement for you guys, I went ahead and bought the GTX 1070. In all honesty, I really didn't need the card. My GTX 970 is just fine for me. I literally spent $469 just so I can make these videos and warn you guys. I saw the writing on the wall once I saw Witcher 3 not fully utilizing my GTX 970 with my 4690K overclock. So today I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to show you hard evidence that will be irrefutable. There's just nothing you can do. You can't come back and say a Core i5 2500K is still viable. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, guys, and like I said, I know this could be controversial, but I want to make it clear. This also does not pertain to people that are not high refresh gamers. And those are the people that I'm trying to warn on this. Because the GTX 1070 on paper looks like a really good card. And in reality, it is. It's very fast, and it can deliver the very high frame rates that 144 Hz gamers are really looking for at 1080p. Now, of course, at 1440p, this also relates to you too if you're a 144 or 165 Hz 1440p gamer. This also relates to you, however, just not for the GTX 1070. We're talking like Titan P level performance or next generation GPUs. And that's really what this comes down to, guys, is next year, the next generation of GPUs are going to be even more powerful, and your Core i5 is going to be horribly, horribly underpowered. So you need to start planning your upgrade process now. That is the main focus of this video. But once again, I just want to make it clear, if you are a 60 Hz gamer, this really does not relate to you. Okay, starting off, I'm going to just go ahead and throw out there the biggest and most glaring example that just struck me while I was doing all these benchmarks. Here, I'm going to throw up some Crysis 3 footage right now. As you can see, the GTX 970 is on the right and the GTX 1070 is on the left. You can see the GPU utilization up at the top. Right under that's the CPU utilization. And then at the very bottom, you can see your frames per second. And as you can see, the frames per second is virtually identical. Now, this is not the segment that I use for my benchmark. And I will throw up actual benchmark graphs here in a minute. I use the train ride, the same thing that Digital Foundry uses, because it's more of a balanced section between CPU and GPU heavy tasks going on. So it's just more balanced overall. However, this particular segment just really stood out at me because you have to play through this every time you get to the train sequence. And I noticed that I'm only getting 70 frames per second on a GTX 1070. And that is just well below where I need it to be. We're shooting for 100 frames per second at minimum, if possible. The GPU utilization on the GTX 1070 hovers between 70 and 80%, sometimes going a little bit higher, sometimes going a little bit lower. But in this sequence, it's actually pretty stable in that range, which means there's about 20 to 30% performance that's not being utilized because the CPU is not fast enough. Now, looking at the GTX 970, of course, it's damn near 99%, which is 100% in this monitoring software, GPU utilization. So the 970 is completely being tapped out, and we have a little bit of extra room on our 4690K. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual hard benchmarks, which is more of a balanced section, like I said. So looking at these benchmarks, clearly the GTX 1070 is a little bit faster. So that's where that extra performance that we have on our 4690K is coming into play. Okay, so as we can see, it's 24% faster at the exact same settings. I went ahead and put up other settings so you guys can go back and compare to our CPU showdown video if you want a one-for-one comparison, because I didn't have 4 gigahertz 4670K or 4690K numbers in there. And of course, I will be using these numbers in our CPU showdown video for Haswell CPUs here in the future. All right, so that's one benchmark. So let's go ahead and move on to Witcher 3. Okay, so the first thing you're really going to notice is it's kind of a similar story here. The GPU utilization on the GTX 970 is virtually 100% the whole way through and through. It does dip down at some points, so this lets us know that our CPU is pretty much being completely maxed out here. It's going to go back and forth, but most of the time, the GPU is 100% and the CPU's got a little bit extra to give. However, the GTX 1070, it actually ranges pretty hard in here. It will hit into the mid to high 90s there for a few seconds, and then it'll start fluctuating. However, the vast majority of the time you'll notice it's somewhere between 70 and 80%, kind of like before, dipping as low as into the 50%, high 50s. It'll get down to about 56% utilization. That means 44% of my GPU's horsepower is not being used because the CPU is bottlenecking it that hard. That's insane. But like I said, on the other hand, there are times where it will hit damn near 100% utilization on the 1070, which just goes to show how wildly Witcher 3 can vary. Okay, so let's take a look at some actual numbers. Let's check out the benchmark numbers. And as you can see, it's kind of a similar story. There's a pretty big jump between the 1070 and 970. So, okay, yeah, it looks like it's a pretty solid upgrade there. Oh, look at that. It's another 24%, right on the nose. So this is a pretty good indication of what kind of performance level we have left in our 4690K at 4.4 gigahertz with 2400 DDR3 RAM. There's about 24% performance left in this processor that could be utilized over a GTX 970. Considering a GTX 1070 is damn near 60% faster, and that's right now with early drivers. So it will get even bigger than that over time. So we're looking at virtually 36% performance that is just not going to be tapped by a 4690K. Okay, so now I know what you're thinking. Well, what about Skylake? Skylake's better. Skylake's more efficient. It is better. So the 6600K Skylake CPU i5 will be about 10% faster. Instead of essentially losing 36% performance, we will lose 26%. So it will technically run a little bit faster, but you will still not be able to fully utilize a GTX 1070. Alright guys, I know this is hard data, and I know a lot of you guys are going, oh no, I don't want to hear this, this isn't good. The reason why I'm doing this is to let you know, hey, if you're planning on keeping your Core i5 system for a while, and you should, at least until Zen comes out and the CPU market kind of rebalances, hopefully that comes out, does well, Intel will lower their prices, and we have more competition. That will be the best time to upgrade. However, at that point, new GPUs are going to be kind of on the horizon. So there's no reason to go out there and spend $450 on a graphics card that you can't really use. Now, yes, if you're going to be gaming at 1440p, that's going to throw more back onto the GPU. Yes, we all know that. However, you're not going to be gaming 1440p 144 hertz. And as I've already said, that's who I'm talking to right now. I'm talking for people that don't want to spend $500 or $600 on a 1440p 144 hertz monitor. I'm talking to the people that want better than 1080p 60, better than 1440p 60, because the higher refresh rate is far better than resolution. And if you haven't tried it out, I suggest you try it. And there's a lot of you guys out there that have 144 hertz panels or better. And right now, unless you're an extreme enthusiast with $500, $600, $700 monitors, you're probably running 144 hertz 1080p because price to performance, that's the way to go. And generally, people looking at those monitors are running i7s anyway, so they don't really have to worry about this. And they're also probably running GTX 1080s or looking at the Titans or waiting for the 1080 Ti. The GTX 1070 is the more mainstream market. That's where I sit. Me personally, I like the best performance for my dollar. That's why I've used i5s. That's why I have an i5, guys. I'm not saying that they're bad processors. They're just no longer good for this particular segment. Now, I didn't know this. This is why I'm bringing these videos to you. I went ahead and bought a 144 hertz monitor, not realizing how big of a deal it was on the CPU. That's the main reason why I'm bringing you these videos, okay? So it's not that I'm trying to tell you that your processor is not good. I'm trying to save you money, and that is all. I'm sorry to anybody who thinks that I'm ruining some of the kind of drama going on with our CPU Showdown series. I'm sorry, this kind of is a bit of a spoiler because this is kind of a big deal. But I also just realized that the 1070s are becoming extremely available. So anybody who wants to buy one can get one right now. And I'm just trying to save some people some money because honestly, it looks like maybe the 1060 is going to be the way to go as long as the price isn't too out of this world and if it's faster than a GTX 980. GTX 980 is 15% faster than a GTX 970. So that's going to help utilize the Core i5s more to their fullest without, pushing them too far where you're throwing money away on a GPU. So honestly, for a Core i5 4690K, the best graphics card I can recommend would probably be a GTX 980 because even a 980 Ti, you're kind of throwing away money on that one because it's going to be too powerful. An overclocked GTX 980 or probably a GTX 1060 will get you kind of that nice sweet spot to where your processor is being completely utilized. You're getting all the frames per second out of it that you can, and you're not overspending on, like I said, a $450 video card. You're going to get, hopefully, the 1060 launches at the $250 mark. We'll have to wait and see. Now, if it is $300, you might just be better off just getting a used GTX 970 or an RX 480 and, maybe just having a little bit of extra overhead on your CPU. So if you want to quick tab out and, multitask a little bit, you have a little bit of extra performance there to do that. Alrighty guys, if you found this video helpful, please please share with your friends. This is a big one. This is one that I really need you guys to help get out there because this is just to help people save some money. Don't overspend on graphics cards. Graphics cards prices plummet faster than any other computer component. So please share this with your friends. Please leave comments in the comment section. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. We're going to keep doing these videos. We just want to help you guys out. And I hope you guys have yourselves a good night.